Don't bow to me. The stranger's voice cut through the storm. Not tonight. Not when I am the one asking for shelter. Elena Whitmore froze beneath the old pine trees, her hand still wrapped around the edge of the stranger's black cloak. She had spent her entire life being told that an Omega should know her place. Stay quiet. Stay useful. Never stand too close to an alpha. Never look a powerful wolf in the eyes. But the man standing in front of her was different. He looked like someone who had carried 1,000 battles without needing anyone to know about them. His dark coat was worn from the road, his expression calm but unreadable, and his eyes held the kind of loneliness that made Elena forget, for a moment, that she was supposed to be afraid. The winter wind rushed through the valley, shaking the branches above them. Elena had been traveling alone for hours, searching for somewhere safe before the storm became impossible to cross. She never expected to find a stranger standing beside an abandoned mountain path. And she definitely never expected him to give her his own cloak. You should keep it, Elena said softly. You need it more than I do. The man looked almost surprised. Most people who met him asked what he could do for them. They wanted protection, status, favor. This Omega was worried about him. I've survived worse than a cold night, he replied. Elena studied him carefully. That sounds like something someone says when they're used to surviving everything alone. For a moment, the stranger said nothing. Because she was right. His name was Adrian Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Blackthorn Dominion, the ruler every pack in the Northern Territories feared and respected, the warrior who had spent months away from his throne protecting his people, the man who had returned from war only to discover that the greatest threat to his kingdom might not come from outside its borders. Someone inside the royal circle had betrayed him. That was why Adrian had traveled without his crown, without his guards, without anyone knowing where he was. He needed answers before he returned to the palace. He did not expect to find an Omega who looked at him like he was just another exhausted traveler. Then something changed. A strange warmth moved through the cold air between them. Adrian's breath stopped. The mark of the ancient mate bond, hidden for years beneath layers of duty and control, flickered faintly against his skin. Impossible. Not here. Not now. Elena noticed his sudden silence. Are you okay? Adrian quickly pulled his sleeve down, hiding the sign. I'm fine. But for the first time in years, he knew that was a lie. Because the woman standing beneath his cloak was not supposed to exist in his carefully planned world. And Elena had no idea that the stranger protecting her from the storm was the same man every wolf in the kingdom called their king. As the snow continued falling, a distant howl echoed across the mountains. Not a warning, a greeting. Adrian turned toward the sound, his expression changing for the first time. His royal wolf had recognized her, and somehow, the most powerful creature in his kingdom had chosen to trust the one person who did not know his name. The stranger's secret followed Elena long before she discovered his name. The next morning, the storm had finally passed. The mountains were quiet again, covered in a blanket of fresh snow that made the world feel untouched. For the first time in days, Elena felt like she could breathe. She stood near the small hunting cabin, holding a cup of warm tea while watching the man who had saved her the night before. He was different in daylight. The exhaustion was still there. The quiet sadness in his eyes was still there. But now Elena noticed something else. The way he stood, the way he watched the forest, the way every sound around him seemed to reach him before anyone else noticed. You are not just a traveler, are you? Elena asked. The man looked over his shoulder. I never said I was. She raised an eyebrow. You also never said what you were. A small smile appeared on his face. It was brief, almost impossible to notice, but Elena saw it. You ask a lot of questions, and you avoid answering most of them. For a moment, the cabin became quiet. Adrian Blackthorn had faced entire armies, difficult negotiations, and powerful alpha leaders who wanted his throne. None of them made him feel as uncertain as this one Omega standing in front of him with a simple question. Who are you? It should have been easy to answer. But if Elena knew the truth, everything would change. She would not look at him the same way. People never did. They saw the crown before they saw the man. They saw the Alpha King before they saw Adrian. I am someone who needed a place to disappear for a while, he finally said. Elena studied his face. She knew there was more behind those words, but she did not push further. Instead, she looked toward the forest. Sometimes disappearing is the only way people can figure out who they really are. Adrian looked at her carefully. Those words stayed with him. Because he had spent years becoming the king everyone needed him to be. He had forgotten what remained when the title was removed. Later that day, Elena helped repair the small cabin before continuing her journey. She noticed Adrian watching her with a strange expression. "What?" she asked. "You are not afraid." "Should I be? Most people would be." Elena smiled slightly. "Maybe most people only see what they expect to see." Adrian did not answer. But inside, something shifted. The mate bond he had tried to ignore grew stronger, not because of power or destiny, but because of something much harder to understand. Trust. Then, as evening approached, the sound of horses reached the cabin. Adrian immediately became alert. A group of royal messengers entered the clearing. Their leader stepped forward and lowered his head. "Your Majesty." Elena stopped moving. The words hung in the cold air. "Your Majesty." Her eyes slowly turned toward the man beside her. The stranger who had shared his cloak. The man who had hidden his name. The man who was not a traveler at all. Adrian looked at Elena, knowing there was no way to hide the truth anymore. And for the first time in many years, the Alpha King was not afraid of losing his throne. He was afraid of losing the one person who had never cared about it. Elena had imagined many things about the man who saved her in the mountains. A wandering soldier. A noble traveler. Maybe someone running from a difficult past. But she never imagined he was the one person in the entire kingdom that everyone was waiting for. The Alpha King. The cabin suddenly felt smaller as the royal messengers stood before them. Their respectful silence said more than any announcement could. Adrian Blackthorn was not just a stranger with a worn cloak. He was the ruler of the Blackthorn Dominion, the man whose decisions affected thousands of wolves across every territory under his protection. Elena looked at him, searching for the person she had spoken with beside the fire. The man who admitted he was tired. The man who listened when she spoke. "You could have told me," she said quietly. Adrian did not look away. "I should have." The honesty in his answer surprised her. She expected an excuse. A royal explanation. Instead, he simply accepted the mistake. "Why did you hide it?" Elena asked. Adrian glanced toward the snow-covered mountains. "Because everyone changes when they know who I am. And you thought I would?" He paused. "I did not know." That answer hurt more than she expected. Not because he was the king, but because he believed she might only see the title. Elena stepped away from the cloak she was still holding. "You should know something, Your Majesty. I was not kind to you because you were powerful." Adrian watched her carefully. "Then why were you?" Elena looked at him. "Because you looked like someone who needed kindness." For a moment, the Alpha King had no response. Those words reached deeper than any royal speech or council meeting ever had. Before Adrian could answer, the royal messengers informed him that the palace was waiting. The packed council had been gathering for days, demanding answers about his sudden disappearance after returning from the northern campaign. Elena noticed the tension immediately. This was not just about a king coming home. Something was wrong. "What happened while you were gone?" she asked. Adrian became quiet. "Someone inside my court made decisions without my approval." "Someone close to you?" He nodded slightly. "Close enough to know where my weaknesses are." Elena understood then. The man in front of her was not only carrying the weight of a kingdom. He was carrying the disappointment of being betrayed by people he trusted. As they traveled toward the royal lands, Elena stayed beside Adrian, unsure why she felt safer with him than with anyone else. The bond between them was still a mystery. She could feel something connecting them, something ancient and powerful, but Adrian never used it as a reason to control her. He gave her space. He gave her choices. When they reached the edge of Blackthorn territory, Elena saw the enormous stone walls of the royal stronghold rising above the valley. The guards lowered their heads as Adrian passed. The entire pack recognized their king. But Elena noticed something else. The wolves watching from the distance were not looking at Adrian. They were looking at her. A strange silence spread through the courtyard. Then an old silver wolf stepped forward and lowered its head before Elena. Adrian's expression changed. He knew what this meant. The royal wolf had never bowed to an outsider before, not even to powerful alphas. Elena looked confused. "Why is everyone staring at me?" Adrian quietly answered. "Because they know something neither of us is ready to admit." Before Elena could ask another question, the ancient wolf looked toward the palace doors. And from inside the castle, someone whispered a name Elena had never heard before. "The forgotten Omega has returned." The words followed Elena through the halls of Blackthorn Castle. The forgotten Omega has returned. She did not understand what they meant, but she could feel the weight behind them. The way the servants stopped talking when she walked by. The way some members of the pack looked at her with curiosity, while others looked at her with doubt. Elena had spent her whole life being ignored. She never expected to enter a royal castle and suddenly become the person everyone was watching. Adrian noticed every reaction. He had spent years reading the smallest changes in a room. He knew when people were afraid. He knew when they were hiding something. And right now, the royal court was hiding plenty. "Stay close to me," he said quietly as they entered the grand hall. Elena looked at him. "Because I am in danger?" Adrian hesitated. "Because they will try to decide who you are before they ever meet you." That answer surprised her. The Alpha King was not worried about her standing beside him. He was worried about others taking away her voice. Inside the hall, the pack leaders gathered around the long council table. The atmosphere changed the moment Adrian entered. Everyone stood. Everyone bowed. Everyone except one older Alpha sitting near the center of the room. Lord Everett Vale, one of the oldest members of the Royal Council, watched Elena with a careful expression. "Your Majesty," Everett said, "we were not informed that you would return with a guest." Adrian's eyes became colder. "She is under my protection." A quiet reaction moved through the room. Elena noticed it immediately. The words sounded simple, but everyone understood their meaning. Everett looked at Elena. An Omega from a minor territory entering the royal court creates questions. Elena felt the old familiar feeling return. The feeling of being judged before anyone knew her. Before she could respond, Adrian stepped forward. "Then ask your questions respectfully." The room became silent. Elena looked at him. This was not the distant king she expected. This was the man from the cabin. The man who listened. The man who had given her his cloak without hesitation. Later that evening, Adrian showed Elena a private room in the eastern wing of the castle. It was not a royal chamber. It was a quiet place overlooking the forest. "You can leave whenever you want," he told her. Elena turned toward him. "You mean after everything that happened today, you would just let me walk away?" "Yes." She studied his face. "Even if the bond between us is real?" Adrian became still. He knew they could no longer avoid the truth, especially because of the bond. Elena looked surprised. "Why?" Adrian took a breath. "Because a mate bond should never remove someone's choice. If you stay, I need to know it is because you want to." For the first time since arriving at the castle, Elena felt something change. The world had always told her that being an Omega meant having fewer choices. Adrian was telling her the opposite. Before she could answer, a knock echoed through the room. A royal archivist entered carrying an old sealed document. "Your Majesty," the woman said carefully. "We found something in the family records." Adrian opened the document. His expression changed as he read the first lines. Elena noticed his silence. "What does it say?" Adrian looked at her. "It mentions an Omega who would appear when the kingdom was divided." He looked back at the ancient writing. "And it says she would not come to serve the crown." A cold feeling passed through the room. She would come to change it. The ancient document sat between them, its faded letters carrying a secret that had been hidden for generations. Elena stared at the parchment, trying to understand why a forgotten Omega from a small territory could possibly matter to the future of an entire kingdom. Adrian read the words again, slower this time. He had spent his life studying royal history, old alliances, and the traditions of the pack. But this record was something even he had never seen. "Where did you find this?" Adrian asked the archivist. "In the sealed records beneath the Eastern Library," she replied. "It was placed there by the previous Alpha King. The instructions said it could only be opened when the kingdom faced a time of division." Adrian's expression became serious. Division. That word had followed him since the day he returned from the Northern Territories. The court was already questioning his decisions. Old alliances were breaking apart. And now, this prophecy had appeared at the exact moment Elena walked into his life. Elena stepped closer. "Does it say what I am supposed to do?" Adrian looked at her. "No," she waited. "It says what you are not supposed to become." The room went quiet. He handed her the document. Elena carefully read the final lines. The message was not about power. It was not about becoming a symbol. It was about a choice. An Omega who would unite divided packs not by claiming authority, but by reminding leaders what they had forgotten. Compassion, trust, loyalty. Elena slowly looked up. "They do not want me because of who I am." Adrian understood immediately. "They want to use what they think you represent." Elena nodded. She had spent years being treated as invisible. Now everyone suddenly saw her, but not for the right reasons. Outside the room, whispers traveled through the castle. Some believed Elena was the answer to an old legend. Others believed she was a threat to the balance of the pack. Lord Everett Vale was among those who questioned her presence. During the evening council meeting, he spoke openly. A kingdom cannot be guided by ancient stories and emotions. Adrian sat at the head of the table, listening carefully. Then what should guide it? Everett replied, strength, tradition, the will of the strongest alphas. Elena noticed the way the room reacted. Some agreed. Some looked uncertain. Adrian had spent years maintaining peace between different territories, but now the old beliefs were challenging everything he had built. A pack is not strong because one person stands above everyone else, Adrian said. A pack is strong because everyone has a reason to stand together. Everett looked toward Elena. And does this Omega share your opinion? The question was meant to embarrass her. Instead, Elena answered calmly. I think a leader who only listens to people who agree with him will eventually stop hearing the truth. The room became silent. Adrian looked at her with quiet surprise. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply speaking honestly. Later that night, Adrian found Elena alone in the castle garden. You realize you challenged one of the oldest members of my council, he said. Elena smiled slightly. You realize you brought me into a room full of people who wanted to judge me. For the first time that day, Adrian almost laughed. Almost. Then his expression softened. You are not what they expected. Elena looked at the moon above the castle walls. Neither are you. The bond between them grew stronger, not because of destiny, but because they were finally seeing each other clearly. But neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows near the garden entrance. Someone who had been listening. Someone who now knew the forgotten Omega was not just a legend. She was the key to changing the kingdom, and they intended to make sure that never happened. The secret hidden beneath Blackthorn Castle did not stay hidden for long. By the next morning, Elena could feel the change in the air. The servants spoke more quietly. The guards watched her more carefully. Even the members of the royal pack who had ignored her before now looked at her as if she carried a mystery they wanted to solve. But not everyone was curious. Some were afraid. Adrian noticed it before anyone else. He had spent years learning the language of silence inside a court. A room could say more without words than with them. And this room was saying one thing clearly. Someone was preparing for a conflict. During the morning council meeting, Lord Everett Vale placed several documents on the table. Your Majesty, the pack deserves honesty. Adrian looked at him. About what? Everett glanced toward Elena. About the Omega who has suddenly appeared inside the royal territory. Elena remained calm, but she felt every eye turn toward her. Adrian immediately stepped forward. She is a guest of this kingdom. Everett shook his head. With respect, Your Majesty, she is more than that. The ancient records have caused uncertainty among the packs. Some believe she has a special role. Others believe someone is using old stories to influence the crown. The words were carefully chosen. They were not accusations. Not yet, but everyone understood the meaning behind them. Elena looked at Adrian. She expected anger. Instead, she saw something colder. Disappointment. You think I am being controlled, Adrian said. Everett did not answer directly. I think every Alpha King must protect the stability of the pack. Adrian leaned back slightly. And you believe my judgment cannot be trusted? The silence that followed was enough of an answer. Later that afternoon, Elena walked through the castle gardens, trying to understand everything happening around her. A few days ago, she had been a forgotten Omega from a small territory. Now, powerful alphas were discussing her future as if she were a piece on a game board. Adrian found her near the old stone fountain. You are thinking about leaving. Elena looked at him. Would that make things easier for you? His expression changed immediately. No, but it would stop people from questioning you. Adrian stepped closer, keeping his voice calm. Elena, the problem was never you. She looked away. That is easy for a king to say. The words were quiet, but they carried pain. Adrian understood. She had spent her life being told she was not important. Now she was surrounded by people who only cared because they believed she had value to them. Then let me prove it, he said. Elena looked back at him. How? Adrian answered without hesitation. By letting you choose. That night, the situation became more serious. A message arrived from one of the outer territories. Several pack leaders were demanding that Elena be questioned about the old prophecy. They claimed they needed answers. But Adrian knew the truth. They wanted control. Before the council could gather, Elena discovered something hidden in the archive room. A second document had been placed beside the original record. This one was newer. Someone had added words that changed the meaning of the prophecy. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. An omega beside the throne will weaken the Alpha King. Adrian arrived moments later and saw the document. His expression hardened. That was not written by the original author. Elena looked at him. Someone changed the story. Adrian nodded. And now they are trying to make the kingdom believe a lie. The bond between them felt stronger than before, but neither of them ignored the danger. Because this was no longer about an ancient secret. It was about trust. And someone inside the pack was willing to destroy that trust before the truth could be revealed. The lie spread faster than the truth ever could. By sunrise, whispers had reached every corner of Blackthorn Dominion. The story was no longer about a forgotten Omega who carried an ancient secret. It had become a warning. An Omega beside the throne. An outsider changing the Alpha King. A bond that some believed could threaten the future of the pack. Elena heard every word. She heard it from servants in the hallways. She heard it from the silence of the council members when she entered a room. And the hardest part was not that they doubted her. The hardest part was knowing they were using the same judgment she had spent her whole life trying to escape. Adrian found her standing beside the castle windows, looking over the kingdom below. You have been avoiding everyone today. Elena did not turn around. Maybe they are right. Adrian became still. About what? Maybe I am only causing problems for you. Those words were harder for him to hear than any accusation from the council. Elena. She finally looked at him. Before I came here, you were a king dealing with your own battles. Now your court is questioning your decisions because of me. Adrian walked closer, but stopped before reaching her. He remembered his own promise. She would always have a choice. You are not a problem I need to solve. Elena looked away. Then what am I? Adrian answered honestly. A person who reminded me why this kingdom is worth protecting. For a moment, Elena said nothing. The answer did not remove the fear completely, but it reminded her that Adrian had never asked her to become someone else. Later that day, Adrian called a gathering of the royal pack. Not a private meeting, not a secret discussion, a public one. The entire court gathered in the great hall as Adrian stood before them. Some expected him to deny the bond. Others expected him to announce Elena as a future queen. Instead, he said something no one expected. The mate bond does not give me ownership over Elena Whitmore. The room became silent. It does not give this court the right to decide her future. And it does not give anyone permission to use her as a symbol for their own ambitions. Elena watched him carefully. This was not just a defense of her. It was a challenge to everything the pack had accepted for generations. Lord Everett stepped forward. And what happens when personal feelings interfere with leadership? Adrian looked at him. A true leader knows the difference between protecting power and protecting people. The words moved through the hall. Some members of the pack looked uncertain. Others looked inspired. But before the moment could settle, another voice interrupted. A messenger entered carrying evidence from the outer territories. Your Majesty, there is information regarding the altered prophecy. Everyone turned. Adrian took the documents and read them carefully. His expression changed. Where did you find this? The messenger asked. In the private records of the Vale family. The entire room went quiet. All eyes moved toward Lord Everett. He remained calm, but Elena noticed something. A brief moment of fear. It was gone almost instantly. But she saw it. Adrian saw it too. For years, he had trusted the people closest to him. Now the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Someone within his own court had changed history to control the future. That night, Elena stood with Adrian on the castle balcony. The kingdom lights stretched across the valley below. Are you afraid? She asked. Adrian looked toward the darkness beyond the walls. Yes. Elena was surprised by his answer. You are the Alpha King. Adrian gave a quiet smile. That does not mean I stopped being human. The honesty between them was stronger than the bond itself. But before they could say more, a message arrived from the council. The next gathering would not be a discussion. It would be a trial of loyalty. And this time, Elena would have to decide whether she was still willing to stand beside a king whose own pack was beginning to question him. The Great Hall had never felt so cold. Not because of the winter outside, but because every member of the royal pack had gathered with one question in their minds. Could they still trust their Alpha King? Adrian Blackthorne stood at the front of the chamber without his crown. Elena noticed it immediately. He had chosen to stand there as Adrian, not as a symbol of power. The council members sat in silence as Lord Everett Vale placed the altered prophecy on the table. "The pack deserves answers," Everett said. "We need to understand why the Alpha King is protecting someone connected to an ancient warning." Elena felt the weight of every gaze. Months ago, she would have lowered her eyes. She would have stayed silent because that was what Omegas were expected to do in many territories. But something had changed. Not because she had gained power, because she had found her voice. Adrian looked at her, but he did not speak for her. He waited. He gave her the choice. Elena stepped forward. "You keep asking what I represent." Her voice was calm. "But none of you have asked who I am." The room became quiet. "I am not a prophecy. I am not a tool for the crown. And I am not a threat simply because some of you are afraid of what you do not understand." Some members of the pack looked surprised. Others looked away. Lord Everett remained composed. Strong words from someone who arrived only days ago. Elena nodded. "You are right. I arrived only days ago. But I saw something many of you have forgotten." She looked toward Adrian. "I saw a king without his crown. I saw someone carrying the weight of an entire kingdom while believing he had to carry it alone." Adrian's expression softened slightly. He had spent years hiding his struggles behind duty. Hearing Elena say those words in front of everyone meant more than she realized. Then the council presented their final argument. They claimed the mate bond itself could be influencing Adrian's judgment. They demanded that Elena leave the royal territory until the investigation was complete. The hall waited for Adrian's response. Everyone expected the Alpha King to command, to use his authority. Instead, Adrian walked down from the platform. "If Elena leaves," he said, "it will be because she chooses to leave." A wave of surprise moved through the room. Not because this council orders it, not because tradition demands it, and not because anyone believes an Omega has fewer rights than an Alpha. The statement changed the atmosphere completely. Some elders looked uncomfortable. Some younger wolves looked inspired. But Lord Everett knew something had shifted. Adrian was no longer defending Elena because of the bond. He was defending the principle behind it. After the meeting ended, Elena found Adrian outside the castle walls. The night air was quiet. "You could have stopped them," she said. "You could have used your authority." Adrian looked at the stars above the mountains. "I could have. Why did you not?" He looked back at her. "Because if I force people to accept you, then they are only accepting my command. I want them to understand your worth." Elena felt the truth behind his words. The connection between them was becoming stronger, but neither of them wanted it to replace trust. Then a messenger arrived with unexpected news. The investigation into the altered prophecy had revealed a hidden record from years ago, a record that could prove who had changed the history of the kingdom. Adrian opened the message and read the final line. His expression changed. "What is it?" Elena asked. He looked at her quietly. The person who changed the prophecy was not trying to destroy the kingdom. A pause followed. "They were preparing for someone exactly like you to appear." The truth hidden inside the old records changed everything. For generations, the Blackthorn Dominion believed the prophecy was a warning, a message telling them to fear the Omega who would stand beside the throne. But when Adrian and Elena uncovered the complete record, they discovered something no one expected. The prophecy had never been about losing power. It had been about changing the way power was used. The missing pages revealed that the original writers had warned future Alpha Kings about one thing. A kingdom could survive many enemies, but it could not survive a leader who forgot the people he was meant to protect. Elena read the final lines quietly. "The one who stands beside the crown will not take the king's strength. She will remind him why he carries it." Adrian stood beside her in the royal library, realizing the words were never meant to control his future. They were meant to challenge it. The next morning, the entire pack gathered one final time in the Great Hall. The council members, the territory leaders, and the families who had watched the conflict unfold all waited for Adrian's decision. Lord Everett Vale stepped forward. His expression was different now. The confidence he once carried was gone. "Your Majesty," he said, "I believed I was protecting the kingdom." Adrian looked at him carefully. "I believe you did." The answer surprised everyone. Adrian did not respond with anger. He did not seek revenge. But protecting a kingdom does not mean protecting old beliefs when those beliefs hurt the people they were supposed to serve. Everett lowered his head. The truth had finally become impossible to ignore. He had allowed fear of change to guide him. And in doing so, he had almost forgotten the purpose of leadership itself. Then Adrian turned toward the entire pack. For too long, we have measured worth by rank, bloodline, and position. His voice carried through the hall. An alpha is not powerful because others are forced to follow him. An alpha is powerful because others choose to trust him. The room remained silent. Elena watched him carefully. This was the man she met beneath the storm. The man without a crown. The man who had given her a choice when everyone else wanted to decide for her. Adrian continued. And an Omega is not valuable because of who she stands beside. She is valuable because of who she is. Those words meant more than a royal announcement. They were a promise that the future would be different. After the gathering ended, Elena stood outside the castle, looking toward the mountains where everything had begun. Adrian joined her, carrying the same black cloak he had given her that night. You still have it, Elena said. He smiled slightly. You never gave it back. She looked at the cloak. I thought it belonged to a king. Adrian shook his head. No, it belonged to a person who needed to remember he was more than a title. Elena smiled. For the first time, the bond between them felt simple. Not a command. Not a destiny forced upon them. A choice they made every day. Years later, the story of the Alpha King and the Forgotten Omega would be told across every territory of the Blackthorn Dominion. But people would not remember it because of a prophecy or a royal title. They would remember a night when a powerful king hid his crown, and a woman everyone overlooked saw the person beneath it. They would remember that loyalty was not earned through fear. Leadership was not proven through control. And love was not valuable because it claimed someone. It was valuable because it allowed two people to stand beside each other freely. Because sometimes, the person the world chooses to ignore is the person who changes everything.